The community honestly is more powerful than some of these institutions that have historically held, wealth and power. I don't know if an organization could not exist, but I think as the future continually builds tools for community as well as recognizing that value, if you're not leveraging it, you probably are on the way out, or at least not taking advantage of one of the biggest tools that you can have, in terms of creating value, is actually leveraging your community.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Profit to the People, the official podcast of Republic, where we believe you have the power to invest in the future you believe in. I'm your host, Lisa Carmen Wang, head of brand at Republic, and I'll be taking you behind the scenes to meet the team, founders, and investors in our community who share their insights on the future of investing and how they're bringing profit back to the people. To learn how you can invest, head over to republic.co and follow us on socials at Join Republic and at Lisa Carmen Wang. Today, I'm here with Brittany Davis and Christie Pitts, partners at Backstage Capital, an investment firm focused on investing in people of color, women, and LGBTQ plus founders. Currently, less than 10% of all venture capital funds go to these groups. Whereas other VCs see this as a pipeline problem, Backstage Capital sees it as the biggest opportunity in investment. Data shows again and again that diverse teams perform better, and diverse investors make better investment decisions. Morgan Stanley estimates that there's more than $4 trillion unrealized in venture capital due to the lack of diversity in investment decisions. To date, Backstage has invested in more than 180 companies led by underrepresented founders since 2015. Backstage Capital successfully maxed out their $1 million campaign on Republic in record time, in 9 hours. Not only that, they brought in nearly 7,000 investors and a record number of first-time and underrepresented investors to participate in this round. This was truly unprecedented, and we are so excited to have Backstage Capital in our Republic portfolio. I personally invested as well in this fundraising round because I'm so excited about it, and I'm really excited to share your story and share what's next for Backstage and your views on the future of diverse founded companies. So welcome, Christie, and welcome, Brittany.
Yay. Thank you, Lisa.
Yes. Thanks for having us.
I've been a huge fan, and, our missions are so aligned personally and at Republic. But just to continue the momentum, because I know that there's been so much, I'd love for you to share any big wins that you've had since the campaign.
So one of the great things about our Republic campaign is that anybody that participated in the campaign stands to benefit when our portfolio is successful, both the companies we had invested in until we raised the campaign and in perpetuity, so investments we make in the future. So really we measure success for ourselves as also what makes our investors successful. And one of the things that is really exciting to see is some of the progress that our portfolio companies are making. So since we wrapped the campaign, we've actually had multiple companies raise $20 million or more in their next round. Two that I wanted to mention while we're here are a company called Maven, which is an ed tech company, and a company called Book Club. And I'm an avid reader. I've been it's a long story, but I read a lot. And so really excited personally about Book Club and also to see the traction that our founders are getting.
Yeah. And kind of to add to that, I think it's an exciting time for our investors, the people that came on during our Reg CF campaign. Because we have built such a strong and really cool portfolio. And now I think a lot of them are showing this momentum, and the people that we're co-investing with, as well as the deals that we're getting access to, it keeps kind of growing and getting more and more impactful in the industry. So it's just a really exciting time. And I think if people were able to, especially our investors, we hosted a stakeholder event where we invited all of the people that invested with the campaign, and they were able to see, how does a VC fund run, what our firm is doing at a whole on the operation side, as well as the fund side, and kind of just that peek into what we're doing. And that was just the first kind of iteration of that. And we look to have more opportunities for investors to connect with, Backstage as a firm and they can see more about kind of what's going on behind closed doors, because I think that is a key part to kind of being part of a part of our investor community, is really seeing kind of what we're up to and more information about VC in general.
Yeah. And I also saw, Maven's part of our portfolio at Republic, Seek VR, Fleeting. Yeah. So all have been really successful on our platform. And the thing is, as we all know, that this sort of interest in underrepresented founders has been an uphill battle. It's not been like this all the time. And, now that you have co-investors like Sequoia, like Initialized, Y Combinator, you have so many of these brand names that are now coming in, and you are a brand name yourself. But what was it like in the early days, trying to get people to take Backstage and your thesis seriously?
So I can speak to this a little bit, and I think Christie will probably have some more perspective. Even taking it back before I even joined Backstage, I joined venture for very personal reasons, but also I saw the financial opportunity also in investing in more underrepresented founders. I looked around the community, my community that I was building, and a lot of these folks were really high potential founders of color and women founders. And a lot of them were struggling to get into VC, but telling VCs that, okay, you're missing out on all of these deals, it was still really hard. And like you said, an uphill battle to really prove kind of the potential that some of these founders have. And I think where Backstage has been so kind of successful in just the fact that Arlen has been able to start the fund 5 years ago, before the conversation was where it is now. I think part of it is making some of these early bets. So you mentioned some of the co-investors that we've now been able to work with. A lot of the companies that we're investing in, we identified and got to know these founders before a lot of other investors, before they were on their radar, basically. So, they were being overlooked. And by the fact that, Backstage was kind of early in seeing some of these overlooked founders, it has paid off, where we built a lot of momentum in the earlier years that now we're seeing and can prove the returns that we're seeing, with some of these founders getting raising higher multiples, different success points that, a lot of the industry was still kind of questioning, is there a pipeline problem? And there's really not, if you're looking, especially most traditional VCs were kind of overlooking huge groups of founders. Mm-hmm. So I think being able to kind of get in early and really see this as an opportunity has been our advantage. And I'm loving to see kind of the industry move with us, which has been pretty cool.
And why is it that you decided to raise a Reg CF campaign and raise on Republic? Because you've done so much in terms of bringing in underrepresented founders, but I've seen that you have a number of initiatives that are bringing in your larger community, and I think that part of what you're doing is not just investing, but building a larger narrative around the importance of what it is that we have to do.
Yes, so we've been following crowdfunding and equity crowdfunding for years. In fact, one of the very first conversations Arlen and I had before I joined Backstage, I think it must have been summer of 2016, was around the equity crowdfunding opportunity. And I think that speaks to the fact that we believe, truly at the core at Backstage, we believe that access should be open to all. And so you see that in our work in terms of who we're investing in for underrepresented founders, but also access to being an investor is really critical and important for creating wealth and generational wealth. And so we've thought about this for a long time in terms of who creates wealth when companies are founded. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to invest in underestimated founders, because they go on to hire diverse teams. When they have an exit, it's them and their teams that benefit from that and then can go on to invest in the next companies. But now it doesn't necessarily have to be a secret network to invest in startups and make money investing in startups. With the advent of equity crowdfunding, anybody can participate. And we had thought about it for a long time. We tossed around doing it, running a crowdfunding campaign a couple of years ago. And we also have been doing advocacy work as well. So Arlen has been advocating with the SEC around, and in particular, one of the topics was around increasing the limit for how much an equity crowdfund could raise. And so I think from a timing perspective, it really aligned for us to come into 2020, utilizing the community that we've built over the years and really offering that opportunity to them to participate in the upside. But also, I want to talk about the importance of Republic. One of the reasons why we chose Republic to partner with is because we knew that Republic would be the right partner for this groundbreaking initiative. And one of the reasons we felt that way was because of the work that had been done with Republic's token. And we actually, as a team, I remember we reviewed some of the content together and former podcasts that Kendrick had done and so forth, just to think about the mindset there. And it really aligned with what we wanted to achieve with our own equity crowdfund. So ultimately, it's in our ethos that we're providing access to people that wouldn't have it otherwise. If you wanted to become an LP or a member of the management company prior to our crowdfund, there's really not a way to do it unless you are an institution yourself and embedded in the networks that exist in venture. And I think just going back a couple of minutes, we talked about what it was like a few years ago. We really pushed the conversation forward about backing underestimated founders. And now I think we're going to continue to push the conversation forward about who benefits from venture firms themselves.
Yeah, and even creating venture funds. So I'm seeing now conversations about people, new emerging managers thinking about ways to leverage their community, similar to how Backstage has been able to do. And I think, I don't know, the whole venture industry as a whole will see some more innovation, I believe, as we have more inclusive VCs that are raising funds. You see emerging managers that are more diverse than the prior kind of decades of VC. So, Backstage falls into that. As we started our fund, from diverse demographics, Arlen being a Black woman who's also gay, all of those demographic kind of points are, really underrepresented within venture. And it speaks to the types of people who've been historically creating venture funds. And it's been done a certain model in a certain way. And as Christie was saying, it's been kind of this who and being able to have resources kind of at the ready or within your immediate network to even start a fund or start investing. So I think when you have more diverse people starting funds like Backstage and some other emerging managers, you're also going to see different models, like people leveraging tools like crowdfunding and different things so that they can also start investing or getting their foot in the door with VC, whatever that looks like. I think I'm just really interested in kind of these more innovative models of venture. And I think it's also driven by more diverse folks getting involved in the investor community.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's the status quo is dead. It's going extinct. Yeah. And you either get on the train or, you're going to get left behind. But I totally agree about just looking at new ways to give people a chance and also give people a feeling of belonging and a true stake in the growth of the future. And that seems like a big part of what you guys have done in terms of bringing your community in. Just some quick stats for people who are listening. It's only 5% of US VC firms are led by women. Only 2% of firms are founded by women of color. 95% of all VC partners are men. So it's still pretty abysmal. But as you said, with the community, you guys are doing more and more in terms of education, giving people opportunity to participate. How have you leveraged the community of investors, and what sort of value have you gotten just from this raise?
Yes, so this is something that I'm really excited about because we already talked about a couple of the really great things in terms of creating access and also sharing about venture and educating people about venture and investing and so forth. But I get really excited about the fact that now we have almost 7,000 people who are invested in seeing our founders succeed. And so there should be no introduction we cannot make for our founders. And there should also be this opportunity for these folks to get the chance to work with our founders and help them move their companies forward. And so that's work that we've been doing since the campaign closed a few months ago. We recently onboarded many of our investors onto a community platform where we can communicate with them, offer them opportunities and so forth, and make introductions and share portfolio asks, and so many more things. So that's one big piece that we're doing. We're seeing great response from the investors, and our portfolio founders are engaging too. So I think that that's the key. And I think this is another piece here that differentiates Backstage from other venture firms, is we really look at having the community as an advantage. Like, all of these people that believe in us and have invested in us are moving us forward. And not to say that we want to use a community as much as we want to engage them and make it valuable on both sides, right? And so these are people that came that want to learn, and we want to give them opportunities. And they also want the opportunity to pitch in too. Now with this community of investors, they're joining other investors that have backed us in our individual funds, as well as mentors and other people who have been engaged with and spending time and valuable resources with Backstage for years. And so that's one big value add that I think we have as a firm, both for our founders and people who we might invest in the future. And then it's also a value add that we're bringing back to the community and society as well.
Do you think that the future, when we think about community, like, can companies or firms, investment firms, survive without a robust and growing community?
I do see that the world is recognizing the value of community much more these days than in prior years. So I think it's only going to get more and more apparent and valuable that you need to be able to, leverage community, build community, and engaging your community. And I think the community, honestly, is more powerful than some of these institutions that have historically held, wealth and power. So, I don't know if an organization could not exist, but I think as the future continually builds tools for community, as well as recognizing that value, if you're not leveraging it, you probably are kind of on the way out, or at least not taking advantage of one of the biggest tools that you can have, in terms of creating value, is actually leveraging your community.
I agree. I think that I'm not going to take a hard line and say you cannot be successful without community, because immediately I started thinking of exceptions to this rule. And so, for example, if you have a very deep tech thesis that's about investing in specific technologies and you have deep expertise in that area, then I think that domain expertise is going to be different, and you're naturally going to draw on a smaller group of people. But with that said, I do think for more generalist investors, and they do need to have an engaged community. And then also, one of our former crew members, his name is Del Johnson, and he's really active on Twitter talking about some of the changes we need to make in VC. And earlier today, I saw some tweets from him about how new emerging managers can create a playbook. And we need to do that based on empirical evidence, which has been lacking in VC. I'm getting somewhere with this, I promise. So I started thinking about this, and I thought, there are some really interesting things that are happening in terms of new venture managers raising via 506c, which is effectively they're raising a venture fund, but they can publicly promote it and market it. And again, you still have to be an accredited investor in order to participate. Transparency is going to be key for us to see the change that we need across all industries. Things like the gender pay gap, that exists because of a lack of transparency around who's making what money in your role, right? And I think a lot of the issues with the systemic oppression that have happened in venture has been because the industry has operated behind closed doors. And those days are completely changing. And so that was a long way of saying, I agree that having an engaged community and being public about the work that you're doing is going to be, in general, the future of this industry. And the people who operate behind closed doors will be the exception to the rule.
This is now really interesting. I'm now thinking about all these other interesting points. Thank you for the question, Lisa. I think about the individual investor, and I think that community is now really a powerful tool for the individual as well. When I looked into the industry, getting involved in venture back, I guess it was 2014, 2015, when I first got a few roles within venture, I would speak with angel investors, and they kind of were investing, by themselves, and had to do all the work and research, anything, deal flow, everything kind of in their own little silo. And I think something about the community side for the individual and being able to plug in to a community like ours by being part of our investor community, or just different tools I'm seeing online and different emerging managers offering different community platforms. I think that's game changing for individuals. So, for the individual investor out there, I think that's also a really powerful tool that I didn't see before, even as recent as 5 years ago, where people were able to really have a lot of power in their investment process and tools at their disposal. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about visibility, to your point, transparency and visibility. And I think especially underrepresented individuals, whether you're an investor or a founder, just haven't had those opportunities for visibility, and everything's changing. Just even like with social media and the way information is distributed. How did Backstage leverage visibility or different tools as you were marketing and building out your campaign?
I think this is where we really have to give Arlen her due, because she is a genius at this. And she's just so strong in terms of representing herself and representing the work that we're doing at Backstage. And that's work that she's been doing for a decade, for years, even before we had our first LP check. And so I think, we have had an engaged community of people that have been following us. And a large part of that has to do with Arlen's presence and the work that she's been doing. And then that was great. So then it's about how do we like actually get the word out to those people? And so we just put a campaign together, not to downplay the work that we did, but we had a campaign that we put together, and we really focused on education and letting people know that this was an opportunity, reaching out to people that have been following us, and really ensuring that those that had the opportunity to get in could. And then we were surprised ourselves at how quickly the fundraise went.
Yeah, it was cool to see people who genuinely connected with our mission or have been following Backstage for years and wanted to get in, and then shared with their community like, oh, there's this opportunity to invest, like you have to do it. And they're telling folks. Like, that was pretty cool to watch, because I think, we started the momentum by getting the word out, but I think it started to kind of snowball from there, because people in the community got so excited and shared it pretty rapidly, especially in that first wave of announcing the raise on Republic. So I think fortunately we have a lot of people in our Backstage fam that are super connected to what we're doing, and then we're spreading the word for us.
And then even on that note, I remember posting about our raise on LinkedIn, and, my background, I grew up in retail sales. Like, I started in very entry-level jobs, and people reached out to me that I knew from way back when, like selling from a kiosk in the mall, and were like, hey, this is cool. Now I can participate. So I think that speaks to the pent-up demand that exists. People are really excited about startups and venture. They want the opportunity to participate. And when we brought this, I was surprised by people from my life that were interested in participating, that I didn't even realize were following Backstage or knew what we were doing.
I think right now you can't disconnect essentially anything going on in the finance world with the world at large, right? Like, with the pandemic, with social and political events like George Floyd's death, Black Lives Matter, the recent presidential election, how does that affected Backstage Capital and even the enthusiasm for what you guys are doing from the investor and founder side? Thinking
about everything that went on in summer of 2020 with George Floyd's murder, I think it did awaken a lot of the investor community to take a look at, essentially racial injustice at every level, at least just noticing it. I think we have a long way to go in terms of making systemic change. But I will say I have noticed a difference in institutions as well as individuals wanting to get involved, or especially on the investor side, I see people wanting to try to find more investment opportunities that are from underrepresented people, institutions wanting to put capital into funds led by underrepresented people. I think there has been that motivation that's definitely been more than it has been in years prior. But I think I still am skeptical. I think I guess I've just lived as a Black woman my whole life, and realized that, it probably is going to be a long road. It won't change overnight. But the optimist in me has definitely recognized that There has been a shift, and people are very much more vocal about wanting to get involved. And we have actually seen more individuals as well as institutions get excited and interested in what Backstage is doing, as well as other more diverse emerging VC managers. So I'm excited about that trend. I just wonder how long will that continue? And I'd love to see more long-term kind of initiatives at play where we can really shift capital to a more inclusive group of either founders and investors. Long-term, I'm waiting for a lot of that kind of shift, but yeah, we've noticed a change.
Yeah. And it's just so important, I think, more and more to actually walk the walk and not talk the talk, because I do think there's that transition period. And I think we're still in that transition period, to your point of like, it's hot to talk the talk. Everyone is talking the talk, and like, it's almost like if you're not, then it's frowned upon and you'll get canceled. But now it's like, we have to clear that noise and brush aside the debris and be like, okay, who's actually walking the walk? And then find ways to partner and actually come together to make that future a reality. So I imagine there's, and we get this too, still critiques about your investment thesis and, the pipeline problem. How do you respond to critiques that this is charity work, or this is like philanthropy, but it's not a real investment opportunity, or just anything else that you get? Because I imagine there's still a lot.
So I will say that a lot of it is not said to our face as much as it was in the past. And especially when we were just getting started, some of the comments around, like there are not enough women founders or Black founders that are building venture-backed global businesses. People know now not to say that out loud directly to us. I think it's well proven that the conversations are still happening behind closed doors. For me, I'll just speak for myself. Our results will show the wealth, the returns on our investments, and the wealth that we create for our investors prove our thesis. And there's so much else that proves our thesis. If anyone chooses to believe that this is charity work or that it's not real business, then they're willingly oblivious to the reality that we live in today and literally have their heads in the sand. Well, I guess not literally, because that doesn't make sense. But they have their heads in the sand when it comes to the demographic shifts that are happening in the US and around the world. And, maybe it's because they're comfortable. That's what I could say. And they can get uncomfortable or not. That's up to them. That's not going to stop us from doing the work that we're doing and generating the returns that we're going to generate. So at the end of the day, I think it's good for us to be noticed and for people to have an opinion. But Arlen said a while ago, help or get out of the way. And that's how I feel as well. And I'm not here to debate somebody as to whether or not this is charity work. If they have that belief, they can choose to continue to have the wrong opinion, and we don't need to engage.
Absolutely. And we're seeing it, as Christie mentioned, in our results. We've managed to invest in 180 companies and growing. There's definitely no pipeline problem. And we only see that number, growing as we continue to add funds under management and continue to invest in companies. But I would say the future is getting clearer and clearer about these demographic shifts. And I think it's something you can't deny. So if you really start taking a look at the numbers and where kind of the future consumer businesses are going, future of kind of any industry, if you're not looking at it in a more inclusive way about who's creating companies in those spaces, as well as who's getting investment when they're creating companies in those spaces, you are just missing out. And now I think it's becoming clearer and clearer. So I think the people who can't see that yet, they will get left behind. And I'm also fine with that. I think there are going to be some people who don't want to see that future because they have been seeing the past. It's all about pattern matching, especially in venture. And we've seen a certain type of founder background demographic get funded and be successful. But if we're really building for, the companies of the future, the markets of the future, those creators will look different and they'll come from different backgrounds. So I think, we're seeing that, and it's going to play out over the next, decade. And I think the people who don't see that, they'll get left.
Yeah, I often say to any founders that I work with, or really anyone in the underrepresented community, it's like, it's great to be underestimated. Going through myself from Wall Street to Silicon Valley and just like onwards in all these male dominated industries, it's like, at first you think it's an issue. It's like, oh, I need to prove myself. But I do think we're at this point to what you guys both said. It's like, I don't need to prove anything to you. If you don't want to listen, if you don't want to see the reality in front of you, like someone else will. And there's definitely options. But I think it's actually fun to be underestimated these days.
I agree with that. One other thing I was just thinking about, I was reading this morning in the business news. So there's a breakup with L Brands, which is Victoria's Secret. So the CEO said, we failed because we were focused on what men wanted. Mm-hmm. And that the audacity of saying that out loud, like this is a company that has made products specifically for women for decades. And so to say, our strategy was to sell what men wanted to women and it failed. It made me glad that it was said out loud, because I thought, so many times these things are swept under the rug, but it also made me feel like I just wanted to shout it from the rooftops, because it's the same general principle as what we're doing at Backstage, and the future is inclusive. And if you're not building that way, or if you're choosing to ignore that, then do it at your own peril.
Yeah. And part of that is, I think, the ability to admit to that is because, women and people of color, we have a voice now. And that was the power of community. Because I think in the past, you'd be a pariah if you were like one woman who spoke out. And now it's like, you can't ignore it. And when you have community with a collective voice that's saying like, we're not willing to accept this past or the status quo anymore, that's when, the people who have traditionally been in power have to admit like, okay, maybe it's not going to work anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What advice would you give to first-time investors or people who are thinking about investing, or even emerging fund managers?
Yeah, I think for first-time investors, I think just getting involved and getting even going to Republic and starting to invest on that platform is huge. And I think I wish I even started doing that sooner as I build my own personal investments and invest at Backstage. Just actually, even investing the minimum amount in some companies that you find interesting, actually just doing it is the best way to get started. So I think the fact that we have tools like really high quality companies raising on crowdfunding campaigns, and you're able to invest as little as $100 sometimes, I think that's huge for the investor who just wants to get started. And then the second thing is, I think we started talking about it in the earlier part of the conversation, but I do think there has been a little bit more of a kind of effort to democratize some of the information around venture and investing. I see it more broadly. We're making a genuine effort to do that at Backstage, especially through our Reg CF campaign. So I think any way that you can participate in just educating yourself as well online by investing in companies, you get a lot of education that way. I think just doing it, you will actually get started, and then you'll actually find yourself building a track record in investing. That's something that I wish someone told me earlier, because I thought I had to do all these things before I felt qualified to invest in something. And now I think people are getting started in a lot of different ways, especially just being able to go on to some of these platforms and get involved with a company quite a low minimum.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I was just talking to somebody recently who's trying to get into venture. They're switching careers. And that was my recommendation to this person was, if you have $500, go find 5 startups and write 5 $100 checks on Republic or on a crowdfunding platform. Because until you have money in the game, then it's kind of, it changes the dynamics completely. And also the opportunity to learn about these companies and what they're sharing on their Republic pages, what they share as they grow. You could be alongside those founders as they build. And there's nothing that can replicate that except for investing. And you can do that now with such low minimums. So it's really a new day. Anybody that's interested in being an investor can participate. And that's so exciting.
Any best practices or questions that you ask when you are evaluating deals?
Yeah. So I think about, so we invest fairly early stage. So I think it also depends on, this comment is for early stage investors and how I think. So my approach really has been to get to know the founder, but also get to know their vision and what they're building. and really connect those two. And I actually really work with the founder as I'm having that first conversation or getting to know them to really understand, like, if everything goes right and you're telling me, like, this is the business and this is the long-term vision and how are you changing the world or your industry with the problem that you're solving? Like, I want to get that full picture and get fully excited with you as a founder. And then from there, I try to dial it back and do some analysis on, what are the risks involved? And then I start looking at some of the other kind of qualifiers to really think about, will they really get there? And some of the risks and some of the things that it will take to be successful. But I think one thing that I really at least encourage early stage investors to do is to see that big picture with the founder, because it's easy to screen out lots of things if you don't see that vision and that potential with the founder. And I think that's been something that I have been doing since I kind of started in venture, especially seeing so many early stage companies. So my background, I started at Techstars back in 2014, and then I worked at another fund called Village Capital, and they both were focused very early stage on very early stage ventures, investing kind of at that pre MVP very early. So you'll miss out on so much if you're just looking at certain metrics or effectively screening out people versus thinking, can I see this vision with them? Can they build this billion-dollar unicorn company? And then thinking, okay, let me connect and really understand about this founder, and do they have what it takes to do that, or recruit the people in their circle that they will need to help them build that business. So thoroughly understanding the potential of the vision is core for me. And then the second, kind of in parallel, is also understanding how that founder is able to build that vision. Those two at the early stage, once I have that, I feel like I can then evaluate and make decisions from there.
The only thing I would add is something that I look for when speaking with founders is around what they've accomplished so far. So even if there's not a product yet, or there's not revenue yet, that's not a problem, but just understanding why is this what they're working on and what have they done to begin addressing that, and getting a glimpse into their mindset as they address the opportunity and see how big it can grow is something that I think is really enlightening.
Now that you guys have done so much in such a short period of time, started changing this narrative, what does the future of Backstage Capital look like?
So I think that you're going to continue to see us push the envelope when it comes to investing, when it comes to bringing people along with us. You're going to see huge returns financially. And so thank you to every single person that participated in our Republic campaign. Thank you. And we're not going to let you down, first of all. And then secondly, this is a long ride. We're in this game for decades. And so from my perspective, don't try to put us into a box. Don't think about, what are other venture firms doing, because we're not playing by everybody else's rules. We're here to create access for founders, create access for investors, make ourselves wealthy, and those who are with us really wealthy along the way.
Yeah, I love that. So similarly, I think we're building our own playbook. So I think that's something that needs to happen in venture. And it's something I'm, like I mentioned, very excited about, just seeing new people come into venture and build funds differently. We're doing that, and we will continue to do that. And also the returns. I think that's got to be said, because we're starting to see some of the companies that we backed fairly early on are starting to do really well. And that's so exciting for the story and the narrative around underrepresented founders, but then also for people who participated in investing with us. We will see that benefit, and I'm excited to see that. And then kind of just looking at it from the market overall, I think founders that have been historically overlooked there is a shift happening, and that's positive for everyone, because I'm starting to see kind of this whole rising tide where, we started this conversation saying we've had 2 portfolio companies that have raised, $20 million Series A rounds within the last couple months. And, that's only going to continue. And we see it across the whole ecosystem, Black founders, Latinx founders, women founders, LGBTQ founders. It's super exciting. And I think we are essentially moving with that wave. Where we started, we were investing very early stage, and seeing these companies mature is so exciting. And I'm so happy to have so many investors, invested in our firm, invested in the funds, to be part of this with us as we do grow and grow with this whole market that is getting, seeing all these wins. So it's an exciting time, and I'm just, excited for the future because we are seeing that tide has shifted a bit.
Amazing. I hope everyone who is watching and listening just feels how infectious this energy is and like this momentum that we cannot deny. I'm so excited for what you have planned at Backstage and to be part of that journey as well as an investor. But your final question for you, for both, and either one of you can start, is what does it mean to you to bring profit to the people?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it means generational wealth creation. So I think the people are diverse. It's an inclusive group, if you're saying people. And I think we've, especially as historically kind of underrepresented folks when it comes to wealth and access to resources, we've been left out. So trying to bring all the profit to us people, because, I mean, as Arlen would say, it's about damn time. We need to share those resources, and I'm excited to be a part of that.
What I would add to that is I think sometimes there's a mindset when you hear the concept of like power to the people, or profit to the people, why am I using my air quotes? I always do. It's like, who are the people? And sometimes I feel like there's this perception that the people are not worthy, or maybe the people should not be included by nature. And that's why the systems are set up the way that they are. And there are people that would defend the fact that others have been left out. And my belief is we are lucky to be the servants of the people in this sense. When I think about profit to the people, I think about thank you to the people. So all the people that are coming along with us, that are participating, that are helping our founders, thank you for being willing to do that with us. And also, I can't wait to meet more people, because I think that's how we're going to see the change that needs to happen.
And I love how you humanize that too, because I think often, like people, it's such a big term, and bringing it down to earth, it's like, it's individual humans, right? And every individual matters, every voice matters, every investment matters in terms of moving things forward. And so I'm really grateful that for the work that Backstage is doing and how you guys have engaged people, humans across the board, from the founders community and the investors.
Thank you, Lisa, for having us.
Thank you.
This podcast is provided for educational purposes only by Republic and Republic.co. Nothing discussed should be construed as legal, tax, accounting, or investment advice. The views of the presenters may not be the views of Republic and its affiliates. Always consult with trusted professional advisors before making investments. Private investments are inherently illiquid and may result in a total loss. All rights reserved.